long time ago. I was just a wee little boy. I probably wasn't even 4 foot tall. And I used to go down to the river. Of course, this is just a creek. This is a creek. It's, kind of similar to some of the coves and things, the little islands that were near the river that I grew up on. It was like right behind my house, just 50 feet behind my house was this big, steep hill. You could slide all the way down to the river and go swimming and do various different things, fishing. There was a tree not far away from the back door of the house that had a rope with a tire tied to it, which used to swing out over the river. There were John boats used to race up and down the river. A lot of people say we'd put the big motor on a John boat. But I guess they weren't around in the days that I grew up when they used to do that. But I decided, I would go to the creek. Because I no longer lived on a river. I haven't lived on a river in many years. Well, I went from the river, growing up on the river as a young boy, to farm country, and growing up in farm country, where, I still reside today, which is in the farm country. It's a very, very country-like atmosphere. It's a different lifestyle than living in the city. I just wanted to get out today. I was like, so boring sitting at home. I need some outdoor entertainment. But I've done this so many times over the years. I was like, but it brought back lots of memories, as I walked these paths and I ventured down various trails and through the creek. It brought back, my entire childhood and all the things that I used to do as a child growing up. I wasn't myself, I'm a lot older now. I didn't know if I could do it actually. But I wanted to try. I just wanted to see, as a person grows old, can they still do some of the things that they did as a child? Can they go back in time and relive some of those moments and some of those memories? Just kind of see what it's like out there. Just, to kind of go back in time and remember what it used to be like. As I started to grow, as I started to learn, my education began to develop from all the things that I had seen, and all the things that I had heard. All those things now locked inside my mind as memories. And I was like, I wonder. So, for this one moment in time, I thought I would go back in time and unlock all those hidden thoughts inside my mind that I've not, thought about in a long time. So I decided to open those doors up and let those memories come out and resurface and remind me of how it all started. Because, I was only 2 years old. I started out at 2 years old growing up on a river. I did things from the age of 2 to the age of 5 that a lot of teenagers wouldn't do today. Because, it was just a different time. It was a different way of living, a different way of life, and this and that. But I thought to myself, as all these memories came rolling out, I started remembering all the things that I had done. way back then. Because one of the things that I don't have to face anymore is the floods. Because I lived on a river, the floods used to come up, and the floods would kind of take over, They would just come up inside your house. You would have to move out while the water moved in, and you'd have to go somewhere else and stay until the waters receded. That's something, that I didn't do these days, because I live up on a hillside today, so floods is not part of my memories today, but it is part of my past. I can remember, I went to stay with my aunt and my uncle, and the floods came one time. But out of curiosity, I decided I'm going to go inside the house and just see what it looks like, to look out the windows and watch the floodwaters flow through the house and all around it and this and that. Nothing but water everywhere, wall to wall water, halfway up the walls on the inside of the house. So I walked over the hill from my aunt and uncle's house, and I waded as far as I could. I didn't wade very far in the water. Before you know it, I had to swim. And I could see that the river was up very high, and it was very wide at this point in time. And, I just didn't think about things like that back then. I just started swimming and swimming till I was inside the house. And when I look back, and I remember the house and how it survived the flood, it takes me back to that time where it was either a washer or a dryer that was sitting in the room next to the kitchen, and I was sitting up on top of, I think it was the dryer, I'm not sure, it was a washer or a dryer, one or the other. I was sitting up on top of it and just looking at the water raging down the river, all kinds of stuff floating by. Every now and then I would see a boat go by, I think one time I seen an outhouse floating down, and I seen all types of different things, from people's yards and this and that floating down the river. It was mostly raging in the center of the river, I didn't feel fear at that point in time. I don't know why. I don't know. I just wasn't afraid of the water at that point in time. I was very young, very innocent, and I'd grown up around the water, so I was used to the water. Most of my life since then, I've spent going back to the water, being around the water and this and that. And the water is a very powerful force, It was dangerous back then because I was so young. I don't even think I was 5 years old when I swam to the house. I don't even think I had started school yet. I was not even in the first grade. But, I remember back to those days. And I remember all the trips that I used to make up and down the river when there was no flood. The river was at normal stage. And, I would just walk across the rapids, which would get me across the river to the other side. And I would walk for miles and miles and miles through the woods. And there were castles here and there from the old days, way before my times. And it was just, it was like an adventure for me to travel way up and down the riverside. And I think today, as I travel down this little small creek, it wouldn't even feel a puddle in the river, or maybe the river had flowed over and around an island or something and formed a little pool or something within the island. This entire creek probably doesn't hold that much water. But it was just, reminding me of those days when I used to walk the banks and collect rocks and this and that and make different things out of rocks and stuff like that. Just simple things. It was a very simple way of life. There was nothing complicated or perplexed about it. I did not have to think a whole lot. I did not have to, use any brain power or anything like that. I didn't have to search for the truth. It was always right in front of my nose. There wasn't a whole lot to figure out. It's like, it was my dad. He raced cars back then. So pretty much a lot of people in the neighborhood, they raced cars and this and that. And so I grew up around that, so from a very young age I learned how to be a small engine mechanic and work on the bigger, some of the mid, I don't know what you call them. They're bigger than the small engines. The next step up from a small engine. But also, I was mowing grass from a young age, fishing, catching night crawlers, minnows, crawdads. It's all different types of bait, catawba worms, leeches. And we used to grow a garden. We always had a garden, so there was always a garden. I don't think a year went by where we didn't grow a garden of some sort, where there was always food, fresh food through the summertime. That's something a lot of people, it's kind of a lost art these days. Not very many people do that these days. But back when I was growing up in those days, a lot of people did it. It was just common, everyday thing. But lifestyles change. Lifestyles have changed a lot since I was a wee little lad growing up in the remote areas of the river. There's not a lot of people around. Not a whole lot of people lived on the river. And so, basically, that was what this trip was. This trip was just going back and revisiting those memories of those lost years that I haven't been around in a long, long time. Because, times change, things change, and they've changed a lot since way back then. I did a lot of things way back then that parents wouldn't let you do today. So a lot of parents out there, they would not let their children do it. It'd be like, oh my gosh, no, get away from there, you'll get hurt. So it's a different education today. I used to do all kinds of things when I was growing up. It wasn't just hanging around the river. There was also the winter time. We'd go out and play in the snow. And we had hills on both sides of us. Since we lived down the river, there was hills on both sides of us, and not really tall hills, but they were up there, probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 feet tall. And we used to sled right down those things. We'd cut out places through the woods and cut grapevines and swing on the grapevines and all different types of things like that. And it was just a whole different world. So basically, that's what this video is going back to that whole different world.